this phone has been blowing up all day. Governors from both parties, senators from both parties, Democrats in the House calling, thanking me for saying what everybody's been saying behind the scenes, which is that this stuff is going too far. I am a progressive Democrat.
So I think this is actually a really good follow-up on our prior video and what we've been talking about all week, which is this situation of the Democrat Party knowing that it's gone insane, but being way too scared to actually do anything to stop it, because the whole Van Jones drama this week perfectly summarizes it. To make a long story short, if you didn't see, Van Jones went out and essentially said, hey, I am a pretty massive far left race hustler myself, but guys, now we think it's going a little bit too far, right? Maybe we shouldn't be calling ourselves communists and talking about abolishing the police. Hey, I think we might lose elections like this, and some of these ideas are genuinely just really bad. And it turns out, I guess in response, what Van is at least publicly saying, although I have no reason to not believe it, is a bunch of Democrat politicians basically called him privately and thanked him for going out and saying that and pushing back against the radical base that in many ways the Democrat establishment is completely scared of. And you might look at that on the surface and say, oh, maybe these people aren't as crazy as we really think they are. No, you're missing the point. You see exactly what we've been talking about? The Democrat establishment privately thanked Van Jones. Van Jones is basically taking the fall. He's being their mouthpiece, but publicly won't go out and say anything because they're terrified of the radical communists. So if we look at it that way, who is really functionally in charge of the Democrat Party? Is it the people with the title of, oh, hey, I'm a congressman, I'm a politician or something? Or is it the people ultimately making the decisions? Who's really in charge? I think we know the exact answer to that. And it's actually a prime story of the Democrat, first of all, stupidity of allowing the radicals to basically take over their tent and, inviting in all these crazy, insane people because they thought it helped the opposition to Trump. Now they're the opposition to them as well. But then secondly, the fundamental cowardice, because after making that mistake, they can't even stand in front of the mob and say, okay, listen, this is not happening anymore. They can't even stand by their supposed convictions. No, they're going to privately call Van Jones about that. Publicly, all they're doing is trying to grovel to the mob, trying to basically ask them for apologies, do whatever that these crazy cycles want. And I think it's actually a even worse indictment of the Democrat Party, because this is saying that not only are the Democrat establishment controlled by the radicals and insane and on many levels no better, but also that they don't even necessarily believe all the things that the far left base is pushing, but you're dealing with people who are fundamentally cowardly and will do nothing to stop it. So there you have that. We'll talk about this and a lot more, as well as the reaction or lack thereof from other people within liberal media and the Democrat Party as a whole. Notice how these comments have not sparked a wider discussion. I think that actually tells you a lot. Let's talk about it though. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And before we get into it, let's briefly replay the Van Jones clip that started all of this. I think we showed it in a prior video, but just for context, here's what Van said about the Dems basically going too far left that sparked the whole discussion. Then we'll show you what's happening now as a result.
I am tired of a set of people on the very far left in the Democratic Party. Ideas that are literally insane, nutty, moronic, dangerous, bigoted, are not progressive, they're regressive, and they should not be in our party.
Yeah, so there you have the original clip, basically episode 1000 of a Democrat who started all of this and is now shocked. Oh, wait a minute, guys, I think it's going too far now. Literally rolls the boulder down the slippery slope, and then when it hits the bottom of that slope, he's like, whoa, wait, how could this have happened, right? Invite all these radicals, embrace them, do apologetics for them, and then now that they're acting exactly as you should have seen coming, wait, maybe this was a bad idea. I think this is going too far. Yeah, good luck getting those crazy people to listen to you. We know that's not going to happen. However, take a listen now to what Van is claiming internally within the Democrat Party, these kind of comments have sparked the following reaction, because it is honestly quite interesting.
So, Van, your post struck a nerve, right? We saw it strike a nerve on Fox News. I saw it strike a nerve among many on the left.
Yes.
Okay, for whom some of those things you mentioned have become passionate rallying calls, right?
Yeah.
But you knew it was gonna. You didn't, Van Jones doesn't walk into a moment like this being like, "Oh, I don't think this is gonna have a splash."
Okay, let me go like this.
Oh, why?
To you.
Why? Why do you say?
Because this was necessary.
Thank you. I cannot tell you, this phone has been blowing up all day. Governors from both parties, senators from both parties, Democrats in the House thanking me for saying what everybody's been saying behind the scenes, which is that this stuff is going too far. I am a progressive Democrat. You want to talk about prison reform? I've done it as well as anybody, Republican Democrats in the South with Trump. I've done prison reform. I never said have no prisons. Where are you going to put the Klan? I've done police reform. I never said no police. Where are you going to put the pedophiles? Who's going to grab the pedophiles? This stuff is going too far. And part of the thing that has to happen is we saw what happened in the Republican Party when things started going in a nutty direction and nobody stood up. I am happy that the young people are fighting for affordability, Medicare for all the good things. I've been waiting my whole life to see a youth movement do what it's doing. But it's being hijacked by people who are putting in nutty ideas supporting terrorists, nutty ideas saying that we don't need cops in prison. We can't deport anybody even if they rape somebody. Who said this? Chevalier. Where did Chevalier?
Chevalier is going to be is the Democratic nominee. DSA nominee for Congress now from the Bronx.
Yes.
Yeah, so we could go on all day about the specific nutty issues that he's talking about, but I don't think that's the big takeaway. I think the takeaway is that, hey, wait a minute. You mean to tell me a bunch of Democrats, especially Democrats in the House, called you privately and thanked you for what you said, but very seldom, I mean, we have one example that we'll show you, but en masse, the Democrats didn't say anything publicly about this. Again, that fundamental cowardice we're talking about. That summarizes everything that's wrong with the Democrat Party, as a matter of fact. And that is exactly why the radical takeover, whether Van Jones likes it or not, is inevitable. Because notice how nowhere in that little statement are you going to call out your own party leadership then for being cowards, for pushing back against this? No, because even Van Jones, Mr. I'm standing up for principle here, still doesn't get it. Because in that exact clip, what is he still saying? He's still doing the typical Democrat Party strategy of embracing the radicals, embracing the crazy people, but basically just saying, hey, can you be a little bit more controllable? That's really what's going on, because he's still, giving high praise to the youth movement, as he calls it, which is to refer to these crazy, mentally ill Decepticons embracing communism and Hamas and Mamdani and all that different stuff, right? The things the Democrat Party think, oh, that's a little bit too far. But that's actually the issue we've diagnosed from the beginning. Where did this far left thing arise? How did it become so mainstream from the Democrat Party? It dates back especially to the latter years of the Obama administration, but especially Trump 1, where, if you remember, you had this base of crazy far leftists. You had the Antifa, you had these, college campus situations. But because Democrats understood, hey, these crazy, violent, radical communists oftentimes are doing what? Trying to shut down conservative speakers, intimidate or assault Trump supporters. Hey, that's impeding the other side that's ultimately serving us. Let's embrace the communists, because guess what? That brings energy, that mobilizes people, which no kings, let's not forget, is just a new reskin of that same exact thing. It's a redo of the old Antifa marches, the Women's March, all those situations where you have these far left communist NGOs and kind of militia groups and organized people who all get together and try to astroturf support for the left and make it seem like they're more popular than they are and try to intimidate and push back on the other side, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what happens. The same thing, by the way, as we brought up with the anti-ICE terrorism situation. Why do Democrats encourage that so much? Why do they encourage their voters to go sacrifice themselves and endanger themselves by impeding ICE and breaking the law? Well, that is the entire point, because, hey, it serves us. You look at these mentally ill, crazy people. We can basically throw them at the right wing, throw them at Trump. They'll probably be violent. They're definitely going to be very angry, but that ultimately serves our goals. And so they let all these people into the tent because they found them to effectively be useful idiots. But what is now happening, as by the way, happened in the French Revolution, during the Soviet Union, basically every leftist revolution in history, it's the same exact story. The mob is insane. It's basically the mass mobilization of mentally ill people who have this kind of violent resentment against anyone they deem to be sort of in charge or more exceptional than them or whatever, right? That kind of envy, you could call it whatever you want. But ultimately, as a result, the mob always turns on the leader of the revolution, every single time, right? And that's literally what's now happening in the Democrat Party. You found the worst dredges of society to come invite into your tent because you understood, oh, maybe they'll work for us temporarily. Now you're finding out these mentally ill psychos are uncontrollable, and you're saying, oh, wait a minute. After causing this entire problem, after bringing it on the country, now I'm going to sit here and complain about my voter base being too radical, while still to this day, instead of like fully pushing back on them, saying, look, just don't support Hamas and everything will be fine. Gee, I think this problem is a lot deeper than Palestine or your foreign sand war, okay? I think there are, there's a lot more going on here, but you know how this stuff goes. And by the way, again, very telling. Very few Democrats in general got out to speak or really have big statements on Van Jones, which is saying what? They all secretly agree with him. But again, representing that fundamental cowardice, they're too scared to say it, We do have one example, though, so I guess I'll give credit where it's due. This guy, Representative Seth Moulton out of Massachusetts. Oh, some random congressman I've never heard of? Yes, that's correct. That's like the only guy who came out and spoke about it. He basically brands himself as a moderate who publicly condemns socialism and the DSA and things like that. So
there are a lot of people who feel that the Democratic Party is out of touch. We can't be honest about what's going on, with immigration. We don't have a plan for immigration. We're not able to say what actually Democrats should do to fix the problem. All we are is opposition to Trump. Under Biden, we said inflation is not really a big deal. It's transitory. It's going to go away. And then the whole party said, hey, don't worry. Everything's great. Joe is awesome. He can run for re-election. So the point is, we have this history of kind of just washing over problems and not addressing real concerns that voters have. We got to make sure we don't do that.
Okay, but we've got to make sure. Do you think you're doing that now? Because look no further than a state just north of you, Maine, where I kind of feel like that happened 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think that's honest. I mean, to be honest, it's a problem. It's still a problem.
Yeah, so thank you for the empty words, I guess. Obviously not going to change anything or make a difference. And again, total crickets from the Democrat establishment. But that's basically what's been going on. I also found it to be very telling as I was preparing this video. I wanted to see, for example, the reactions of leftist progressive media, the type of people like, let's say, Kyle Kulinski and others who are constantly doing these big rants. Oh, Chuck Schumer, the establishment, they're supporting genocide, this and that, Where's the coverage then on Van Jones? Isn't he, that kind of establishment Obama Democrat that you hate? Are you going to push back on his statements? Very telling. A lot of them also just were not talking about it, right? Just totally ignored the story, which, pick and choose what you want to report, fine. But, is that almost not an admission in itself? They kind of don't want to touch it because they deep down maybe believe that even Van Jones is correct. But the grifters on the internet, have to go out there and not basically, again, piss off their own supporters or their own radical base, kind of guilty of the same thing, ironically, that the Democrat establishment is guilty of. I don't know. As a matter of fact, the only prominent sort of left-wing outlet I could find that tried to push back from the progressive side on Van Jones was TYT, and even then, all they basically said was, hey, Van, you're kind of a hypocrite because you used to be far left back in the day. And it's like, okay, but then still admitting maybe he has a point. So, not really even much of a response whatsoever, but here's basically what happened with that.
Where Van Jones used to be and where he ended up. And Glenn Greenwald did call him out on that. So he writes that in 2009, Jones was forced to resign from the Obama administration after 6 months because Fox News and establishment Democrats denounced him as the radical left due to his prior support in the 1990s of Mumia Abu-Jamal, calling a GOP member an a-hole, allegedly signing a petition suggesting Bush did 9/11, etc. That's when he realized that wealth and celebrity awaited him only if he were willing instead to transform himself into a vehement defender and guard of establishment dogma, a useful tool for those who had just struck him down. Well, Glenn, I both appreciated your post on X because you're pointing to reality, but also at the same time, how do we address people like Van Jones while avoiding co-signing onto some of these more radical left-wing policies, right?
Yeah, so that is basically the only progressive rebuttal I've actually heard, is effectively to say, hey, Van, you basically have a point, you're not wrong, but you're also a hypocrite because you used to be a radical who, as they got older, embrace the more pragmatic political views, which does generally happen with most people. Therefore, you're the bad messenger. And it's like, okay, I'm not a Van Jones apologist, but in this case, I seem to believe that the message is actually more important than the messenger. But that's all they can basically bring in response because they effectively know that he's right. And that's the entire point. Van Jones substantively not wrong about what he's saying. Now, we likewise attack the messenger for different types of, hey, you triggered this whole thing. But overarching point here is they're correct. But here is the thing. Everybody, once again, is too scared to stop it, right? TYT says, hey, Van, you're not wrong, but because you're the establishment, we're going to go against what you're saying. And yeah, these candidates might be completely insane, but at least they're anti-establishment. So we're going to cheer that on. And that's sort of our political brand, is being fake populists. So there you go, right? And then the Democrat establishment says, we're too scared of the radicals, guys. We're not going to say anything about them. And then, you know what happens next. Is there anyone on this political coalition who is actually willing to be bold and stand up seriously to the insane mob? I guess not. I mean, it doesn't really exist. You have your few John Fettermans and stuff like that, I suppose, but those people are ultimately completely ignored. And so what does that ultimately say? Yes, once again, these violent radical communists are the ones actually in control of the Democrat Party, right? There's that old saying, a lot of people bring it up not really knowing the way in which they're applying it, but that whole thing of you want to know who's really in power? Who is it that you're not allowed to criticize? Well, guess what? In the Democrat Party, we know who is in power. It's the people who you're not allowed to criticize, right? Who is the establishment too scared to criticize? Who is even progressive media too scared to criticize? Is it Israel? Is it AIPAC or whatever? No, actually, it's literally just like the it's the radical left. That's it. That's who's really in charge. Who can't you criticize as a Democrat? The radical left. Well, there you go. There's your answer, right? Absolutely cowardly and ridiculous situation. But still, again, yet another reminder of why we need to beat these people, because their establishment's too scared to do it. Their establishment's too scared and frankly too weak to beat the radical communists. So as usual, that's going to be the job of the patriot once again. Okay. But anyways, that said, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.